Welcome to the journey of being alive. And I don't just mean welcome to this podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Luca Ray, and I'll be your host. And today I'm sitting down with Christina Bertelli, who is an amazing herbalist here in Asheville. And we're going to be talking about the transition between the Western healthcare system and regenerative healthcare and various different aspects of that. So we'll be talking about the role of science in these two systems, the way that optimization looks very different between these two systems, the transition from the illusion of absolute knowledge into greater acceptance of uncertainty in regenerative healthcare, not greater actual uncertainty, but just the acknowledgement of the uncertainty that was always already there, and various other aspects of this transition. We're also talking about intimacy, what it means to have intimacy with yourself and with the medicine you're relating to versus the hollowness of Western society. We're talking about tracking the cycles and how that can be a part of nourishment and health, and lots of other things. So I hope you enjoy. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like this, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Curious what brought you into herbalism over the years, because it's not something that as a child or in school were necessarily presented as a path. So I'm curious what led you there.
Yes, yeah, by necessity. But it started when I was a little girl. My mother gave me a book in my Christmas stocking called The Way of Herbs, by Michael Tierra, and I thought it was pretty neat, and I read a little bit but kind of put it away. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s, I was working in the wilderness as a guide, a couple different forms, like therapeutic guide and just an outdoor leadership school guide. And I loved it. It was really powerful work, very challenging too. And with that came a lot of stress combined with terrible food. When you go backpacking, the food is usually powdered, dehydrated, and I was subsisting on that for like a couple of years straight. So it wreaked havoc on my guts, big time. And then stress of being the guide and responsible for these children or these big groups, and also my co-instructor. So that just locked me up in my system and created my first level of a health struggle that I was needing to fix in order to move forward with my life, because I couldn't really eat without being in severe pain.
That sounds tough. Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't really feel comfortable eating, but then you're hungry, and all the messages of hunger and everything in this area was all disordered. And I went to the doctor, and she said that I have IBS, and she gave me a medicine. And I asked her if there was any suggestions as far as food and what to eat, and she said it had nothing to do with it. I was so shocked. And even though I know nothing, I'm like, you were wrong. you are missing info. You're missing info that I know I need in order to come through this. So I had to figure it out myself. I wasn't going to be able to figure it out from someone else, is what became really clear. So I pulled that book out again and realized there was a lot in there, and I needed to know more. So I enrolled in herbal medicine school. I had to stop doing what I was doing because I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't, and I didn't know what else to do. So
the wilderness therapy, you mean you could wilderness guide?
I couldn't do it. Couldn't stomach it, as I say. Literally, I couldn't.
Right.
My stomach was just doubled over in pain. So I went out to Boulder, Colorado, and started studying with a man named Paul Bertner, and it was at that time called the North American Institute of Medical Herbalism. And he was still is known to have a specific focus on digestive health and clinical herbalism.
Cool.
That was how it began.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard versions of that story quite often of physical challenges that the mainstream healthcare system can't address. as the path, and then realizing like, oh my God, they're missing information, and then something crumbles in terms of belief in experts and belief in the mainstream system, because like it's not just theoretical, it's very much like your own body is not being healed and not being met by the system, and you can feel the contradiction between what you know to be true intuitively and what you're receiving from the outside. So yeah, it's such a powerful route into alternative modalities. And also I think maybe it's part of why you went all the way and became a full-on herbalist, is it's also a much stronger drive where there's such a deep personal resonance and mission of wanting to bring this to more people and really deeply knowing it's true, because it literally transformed your own physical body and your health. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I guess kind of going deeper into the chronic illness side of things while we're on that, beyond your own journey, also your journey, but also beyond and people you've worked with that have chronic illness. Yeah, I'm curious how they come to you, first of all, from having tried mainstream solutions, and then how herbalism helps them and what happens in that process of connecting to this whole other source of wisdom and healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people come to me usually because they've already tried other things. It's rare that people will come to me first, maybe a little bit more often nowadays, but just like myself, like I went to my doctor first, and then you try a few things, and then you get to this place of maybe desperation, but even just like a need for something different, a willingness to open your mind. And that's actually a really cool place, because you're really willing to open the potential for new ideas, new information that otherwise could be really, really close based on your upbringing and your perception. And all of us, our cultural kind of cap that we have, and particularly with medicine, because we've grown up being told certain things about medicine. And so we have to really peel that back in order to first explore herbalism, but then trust herbalism more. So it's kind of an opportunity when you have that chronic illness or significant illness. I don't think that chronic illness is really something we can clearly define. I think it's like a little bit nebulous. Sometimes something's chronic just keeps repeating and coming back, and that's what I see a lot of my clients with. So it's going away, coming back, going away. And then there's like chronic illnesses, which may get that label, but ultimately I think it just is saying it's something going on, a pattern that hasn't yet been discovered as far as how to heal. But it is healable, but we just haven't found the root cause yet. That's my definition of chronic illness. No one has figured it out yet. You haven't figured it out. Your collection of practitioners that you're reaching out to haven't quite put their finger on it yet, because it's complex.
Yeah. I mean, there's this big reframe that I had when I was in college, as I was studying ecology and psychology and different areas of science. And pretty soon I was starting to ask questions, and then the response was, we don't know yet. And I was like, whoa, this seems like a pretty basic thing to not know yet. Like I thought science knew things, and then and I think that it's the same in medicine and in so many things. I think there's maybe a misconception, even with the whole trust the science like phrase, that part of trusting the science is acknowledging that we don't know so many things, and science hasn't touched so many things yet, including many chronic illnesses. And there's a lot of layers. I think also in mental health, there's a lot of layers where a lot of the diagnoses that we have right now are not fully, or even not even close to getting to the root cause of what's actually going on. And they kind of describe it, and they're like kind of helpful in dealing with it in certain ways, but they're not at the root cause level yet, and quite far from it. And that's not some huge failing. That's just how it is. And part of acknowledging that science is like an ongoing process that hasn't gotten that far in certain domains at all. And then there's other, such as herbalism and other traditions that maybe know more about that. Maybe one day science will have great solutions for that as well. But as it stands right now, they're very primitive, and there's this almost like a forced knowledge about it. Like doctors have like pretending to know and like all these diagnoses and this is what you have, that is what you have. But actually there's just like unknowingness there right now. And these other traditions have much more clear and specific ways to deal with that. So I don't know if that resonates, but that's part of how I think about herbalism and other things like that. It needs that reframe of like actually science and mainstream healthcare is like very incomplete as it is.
Yeah, we would have to surrender a lot of control. And we do when one like goes on an alternative healing path and surrender the idea of perfect knowledge. So that cultural cap that we have on, I think a good way to describe that simply is that science knows and your doctor knows everything and knows what's best for you and has a solution, and usually it's in the form of a pill. That's actually quite new relative to human time. But it's so deep for us. And our generation, last 2 generations, I'd say. Those are just like hard facts. And what we have to do is like release the idea that the doctor knows all, which is what came to me. I was so shocked that he didn't have something more for me. And she had nothing to say about this thing called IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Why are my bowels irritable? She didn't really care, or like that wasn't in her radar about the cause. So I kind of blew up my perception of the doctor himself because it came clear she doesn't. And then there's a level of like uncertainty that doesn't feel safe. And that's scary. The doctor doesn't know, and who does? Like there's this unknown world. Unknown worlds are scary. So I think that with this idea of like hard science or, medical doctors who studied everything, that we're seeking safety. Not just the medicine of the bone. We're seeking the safety of it is known, but it's not known. And so with especially the journey of chronic illness, where it's complex and unknown, you have to be in that unsafe way. And you have to sort of take on the healing yourself. Hire and probably consult with others. But the shift is it's your process, your responsibility, and you're the healer and the one that gets healed. That's all you.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Oh yeah.
And it's definitely like, oh, I wish it wasn't so, but it is so. Yeah, I mean, that feels like one of the big bridges to coming into alternative modalities because the trusting is so big in the safety thing. And if you're operating under the assumption that mainstream healthcare and your doctor knows everything and therefore you can trust them, it's like, why would I trust this other stuff that feels less trustable and also is not presenting itself as being as trustworthy? Because I think most people who are alternative practitioners or who are in that world have the mindset exactly that you have, where they've broken through the illusion of perfect control. And so they're not trying to present that. Mm-hmm. And so if you have that illusion, then you're like, why would I go there if, it's just less safe and less trustworthy. Mm-hmm. So there has to be something that breaks that initial illusion of perfect control. And it seems like chronic illness is like a path for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And other things too, there's spiritual crises or mental health crises, various different things. And then it's also, I think, reinforced because you have the doctors are trained to seem like they know everything. So even if there's like a billion diagnoses they can throw at you, and there's all the like, catch-all diagnoses, like, oh, it's just because you're stressed, mm-hmm. and that's why this is happening. Or, like hysteria used to be one. I feel like that's a really helpful example, where now we look back and we're like, that was a totally bullshit diagnosis. But back then it was like totally common. So I think things like depression and anxiety, I think the diagnoses they're not completely off base, but I think they're like missing something about what's going on there. And they're too much of like, here's the absolute perfect answer to what's happening for you. And as you said, here's the pill that's going to solve it, and boom, it's over. But you're actually not even touching what it really is. And we don't even fully know what it really is. And maybe it's a lot of different things that are like with hysteria that are all just being, packed together into one thing.
Yeah. Beautiful. There's so many things that I would like to go deeper with. I want to say though, that So I'm highlighting the unknown as a truth as you maybe enter chronic illness and start to realize your standard doctor, allopathic, will say allopathic doctor may not know or definitely doesn't know. I mean, allopathics will.
Wait, allopathic?
Allopathic would be a Western doctor.
Okay, gotcha.
And pharmaceutical-based doctor that is treating symptoms. And they are not good at chronic illness. Okay, so I talked about how there is an uncertainty and a lack of safety, and a holistic practitioner is much more comfortable with that space and much more comfortable with acknowledging, like, I don't know, but we also know a lot too.
Right.
And so a big part of my role as an herbalist and as a practitioner that shares this medicine and holds this medicine is my experience with the plants and with my own healing process and what I know to be true, which is that healing is possible. And some of these things that are called chronic or unhealable are actually healable. And, these plants actually are medicine that work. It's not like, a need for faith and belief, like religion. Often, you can't see it, but you have to believe in it, and it feels very ethereal. And try it, like, wow, I don't know, it just feels ungrounded. I think a lot of people think that's what herbalism is, but it's actually really grounded medicine. And these plants really do work. And sometimes we just have to figure out the right formula or the right plant to match, but that's where our skills come in as herbalists. Having seen many cases and having, going on our own journey, we hold the confidence in our herbs and the plants themselves, and we can offer that in terms of how we can speak about them and just holding the pull of confidence in plant medicine. So
Yeah. Well, so there's two things coming out of that I'm excited to go more into. The first is what you said, where allopathic, i.e. Western doctors, treat symptoms, and how herbalism is different, because it sounds like there's a very big difference in the approach there. And then the second is about the precision you're talking about, whether it's not just this like woo-wee faith thing, but there is a lot of clear knowledge and precision about how the herbs relate to different things.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about those two. So maybe let's start with the symptoms versus, I guess, whatever you would call the alternative approach within herbalism. Symptom treating versus,
Yeah. So we have, when we get sick, we have something called a symptom that presents itself to our body. It's like, that could be like a rash or a cough. We call that a symptom. And what allopathic Western medicine does really well is we have created medicines that address the symptom. And herbalism can do that too, though. You can use herbalism to address symptoms, and that's not a bad thing. Quelling the cough or lowering the fever. Tylenol does that, and you can use some plants to lower the fever. But we don't want to get over focused on removing the symptom and then stopping there. So that would be a big difference, is that an overly allopathic approach is simply looking to eliminate that annoying symptom. And then that is defined as like success and cure. However, holistic medicine, which includes herbalism, is going to, first of all, approach it lower down at the root cause of what's causing the symptom. And sometimes we need to help that symptom, encourage that symptom to complete itself. And also we just need to identify what the cause is in order to remove that.
Yeah, I feel like there's analogies to that in many different domains, like with emotions as well, or like anxiety or depression, or a lot of those things. The standard approach is like the pill to just remove it.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to amplify the thing that's being pushed down let it complete, not because we want to live in that chronically, but because actually letting it release. I mean, I'm even doing this motion, because often it does involve like, screaming or something, something releasing through the mouth and through the breath, or just through the book, like physical rage or something, and I've had some experiences recently of like letting that happen more, and it's amazing. It's just, it flows out, and then I'm fine again, the same way I'm shaped. So it sounds like maybe there's a similar approach there in herbalism, with sometimes amplifying the symptom, maybe not amplifying, but allowing the symptom to fully happen, and then maybe there's a healing in the symptom happening. Would that
Perfect
be the right
example
way of
is
saying
like a fever. A fever is scary, and you don't want to burn your brain, and that's a big concern when you have an infant. However, the fever is also the medicine. It's your body's incredibly intelligent system to respond to an infection, and so it's heating up your body. And so that heat is helping you sweat and eliminate and bring a temperature up to kill the pathogen. That's how it's meant and designed to work. So what kind of success would it be to take away the fever?
Right. Yes.
So you want to balance having that tool to stop the fever if it gets way too high, but keep it in check and let it go and let it do its work and complete its process when you're sick or when your child is sick. So you want to embrace the symptom of fever.
Yeah, what would be another example in a different kind of illness where that was?
Well, vomiting. Vomiting when you have food poisoning is very healing and essential to get through to the other side. What else?
And I guess the approach would be, instead of taking a pill to reduce nausea, you would take plants that encourage you to vomit faster to get it all out. Would that what it looks like? Or?
That's pretty much universally known, that you got to release either through your bowels or through your vomit when you have a food-borne pathogen. I think most people know that, and it's not too long of a process, and we're really humans, we all let that go. But I think, metaphorically, that's going on in a lot of other cases. We're not comfortable with letting it be around. We want that safety of elimination.
Continuing on the symptoms thread, I'm curious, in more chronic illnesses, and there's other examples there.
Great point, because those are very specifically acute, and those happen. But when we have symptoms that don't leave, that's where it gets really weird and uncomfortable and uncertain. So talking back to the IBS, which I know a lot of people struggle with.
And IBS stands
for irritable bowel syndrome.
That's right.
And it's a syndrome. It's a funny thing because it's just a catch-all to encompass all of the digestive issues that many doctors can't explain or understand and aren't going to necessarily delve into.
Like hysteria.
Like hysteria.
For the gut.
Hysteria too. But IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, all of the things that are causing your digestive system to be quote-unquote irritable, not feel good, be spasmodic, hurt, but there isn't an inquiry as to why. It's just about, let's tell the symptom. I hopefully tell the symptom, but maybe they don't even have success correlating symptoms. It's more, then it becomes management, chronic illness management. And that was just horrible. And I was not okay with living a life of that. I was just a complete no. So then I went on my life path of my mission of figuring it out. And I didn't figure it out quickly. I found levels and layers. And I think that's the way often for people with chronic illness. Maybe they get a blessing of healing it quickly, but it's usually layers. And I think we have to go through a longer period of experiencing the pain. And another important thing I love to remind myself and remind my clients is that symptoms are messy. And so we often want to kind of blame, hate on, and try to eliminate those symptoms. But they are really, truly their guides. And so if we can shift the perspective of eliminating them and more tapping into their wisdom, and even doing meditation to connect with your body and find information that way from within yourself. And also, that's one way, using your intuition. And then you can also use what would maybe be called science to gather data and maybe writing a chart, like when it occurs, what you were doing beforehand, in terms of your thoughts, what you ate, what kind of exercise, like what are the precursors? So that's a way of gathering information on your own. In functional medicine, they call it N of 1. So N being like the number of people in your study. Number of people in your study is 1, and that's yourself. And you are in self-study. So you are going to explore and collect that information on what helps make it better, what makes it work. And then there's also just tapping into that symptom and mixing that energetic guidance, spiritual guidance, any kind of information is useful. Again, we're opening up to new channels and being ready to do things differently. And when that happens, we can get somewhere, get some healing, in a deeper way.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And I'm curious about the link at the end there you were saying between herbalism, which in some sense is physical, like it's a physical plant and you relate to the plant physically. But I guess there's a connection maybe also energetically or spiritually, how you're relating to it. Yeah, what does that link look like in your practice?
All of it. I love all of it. There may be times where I speak more in one way and I speak more in the other. I don't know if I'll ever unite them. But I dance between the two, and I respect them both equally. So I can kind of get more into the scientific side where I'm explaining constituents, and then I can also have moments where we're like doing a shamanic journey to the plant and seeing what information it has, or just tapping in to its essence. And I think that I just want to receive all of that information, and I embrace all of it. Sometimes I will read my patient and what I know they are interested in, and maybe push the boundary a little. But I like to meet my client, patients, but I usually call my people clients. What's comfortable for now for them, and what makes sense. So that's important. We're expanding, but we also have to kind of meet ourselves and each other with where we're at now. And so that's important. And I feel like some people relate really strongly with one or the other. And I just allow for the opening of both sides as it needs to occur for someone else. So I love, and I've attended trainings on both channels of understanding.
Do you find that those are very different, like totally different people are going to these, or is there some overlap and bleed through? Like, are you one of the few that is holding both of those, or is that more of a thing?
Maybe so. I think it's a thing, but I think it's more rare.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would love to explore both of those. So maybe starting with what you mentioned about the shamanic journey of connecting to the plant's essence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure for a lot of people, I know for myself in the past, that didn't really mean anything to me. I didn't, it seemed very, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Is that just words and people are faking it to look cool or something? That was how I used to feel about it. And now I've had those experiences. I'm like, oh my God, this is a real thing. And also, it's been an even additional longer journey to realize that it's quite essential as well. And it's not just like a bonus thing that is like a cool little addition, but the main thing is like the physical characteristics, but it can actually be a central pillar of the whole process as well. So I guess my first question there is to somebody who's never experienced it. to whom it's like, how is this a real thing, or are they just saying things? Like, how would you explain what that means?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a hard question, but I'm curious if you have any insights there.
Well, I would say that, when you were talking, maybe I focus more, if it's, more than 50-50, maybe I'm more like 70-30 on science. If I'm working with a client to explore healing, I don't know how to define it up. Never mind. Scratch that. It depends on the moment. And I would say, don't worry about whether, I think there's like a need. It's real. There's a space. And I felt that in your question, and I felt that when I was new to it too. So I would say coming to it just to like not worry about that, but to really use it as a way to connect with it. Not necessarily to determine its medicine and then use it in a critical way that maybe you feel unsafe and uncertain. I don't know if my information was right that I got in a spiritual journey and now I recommend it to my friends. Take it. That's probably not going to come up, right? So just to connect with a plant as a nature connection, like for you to explore parts of your journey with nature. And it's a meditation. Like a meditation, just like you might use breath to support your meditation. You're using like observation, your eyes on this plant, and you just kind of open. I'm not going to have to come. So I've done this process. First, I do it in a couple different ways. It's principle observation. Anything just pop in, like look at its structure. What does its structure say to you? And again, you're not determining everything about it. You're just like, oh, this comes to mind, and then you ingest it and you explore like where does it land in your body? Where are you feeling it? And that's real physical. Okay, noticing that it's a process of noticing, and what we would do is, and this really helps in grounding confidence. Once we do those, we do 3. We do one with tincture and one with tea. Once we do that independently, then in a circle we share. And a lot of people share similar things with the same plant. That is what helps. Like there maybe.
Yes, for sure. That was a big part of it for me as well with my journey, is when I was with other people and we independently had the same strange spiritual experience with it without having told each other, and then afterwards, realizing we had the same thing and being like, oh my God, okay, so it was just happening inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
We were separately having an experience. Yeah, the word intimacy is coming to me from what you're saying. Both intimacy with yourself, like what you were saying earlier about taking charge of your own journey and listening to your own signals, and like the meditation with your own symptoms, like what is the signal there, the messenger. So there's a sense of intimacy there instead of this hollowness of like this external impersonal authority is going to come in and fix me. It's a very impersonal relationship to yourself, and it's a much more intimate relationship. Especially in crisis, it almost makes it more intimate to be intimate with yourself while you're in crisis.
Yeah.
And then also intimacy with the plant, and this like unforced energy is what I'm hearing, which is you're not, like you must go into the shamanic journey and that has to be part of it to hear what the plant has to say, to know everything. It's more just do what you're comfortable with incrementally and just build an initial relationship. Just like when you meet someone for the first time, you're not immediately jumping into something really extreme. You're just kind of hanging out casually a little bit in groups, and so that kind of soft, and then only doing what you're comfortable with and growing from there without having to be like a thing that has to be a certain way or force. But I think then that's where like, I don't want to do that yet. But if it's like, it's an invitation to have intimacy with this other being, which may then lead also to tangible healing insights. But I'm not forcing that from the beginning. And I'm not doing something that I'm not comfortable with yet. I'm almost letting, as has happened with me and you and everybody that's gone through this, is like letting the experience give you trust. If you're actually experiencing, you're like, oh my God, this is actually happening to me. And then you get more patience further along the journey.
One year with, I don't know that. Yeah.
Uh,
And then there's different plants that make you more. I love it. So, if you don't grow the consistent thing and not being attached to the result. But I didn't hear much from that vine. But I sat with chamomile and he had a lot to say, and I asked him when I drink chamomile tea every day. So you just open to it. And it's super intimate and super individual, and there needs to be any pressure around it.
yeah. Cool. And then let's go down the science route as well. I'm curious about that one. Yeah, I guess maybe at a high level, how would you describe the like general approach from a science perspective you take towards herbalism? Because what I can think of a few, like for example, it's like a matching. Like okay, here's the issue you have, here's the diagnosis, and then here's the plant to use for that. Right. So that's one way model that you could use, or or something else. So I'm curious, like, is it possible to describe in general, like, what the model is there?
Yeah. What you described, I would say, would be what I mentioned earlier, allopathic approach.
Right.
And it's not wrong, and especially, like, depending on the situation. Sometimes you just want to treat that symptom, for the first week while you're in the hospital. So knowing what herb matches a pattern of symptom is okay. But that's just surface level. But I would say that as far as the science of herbalism, or what that means to me is that we have used science, the incredible things that science has to narrow in and identify constituents of plants. That's what we call them. So that means like we can break up the medicine and identify molecules and name them and look at what each molecule and constituent does. And when you put it back together, the holistic impact of that herb is all of it working together in synergy, but science breaks it apart and identifies things. So we then can say, okay, in turmeric, curcumin is a really important part that does most of the healing work of turmeric. So we're going to pull that out and pump it up, turn up curcumin, and maybe just take the whole thing, curcumin, and put it in a pill. So that would be a scientific approach to herbalism. And someone might not even know that. They're grabbing curcumin and they think they're grabbing turmeric, but they're just grabbing one isolated part of it. It's very powerful for inflammation. And that is really helpful and cool. But so that's a way that science can help us. And that herbalism contains science. So, and that also is a way that we can like be clear of the impact of the plant. Whether you isolate it or put it back together as well. Like we can really know that turmeric is anti-inflammatory, even though we have like thousands of years of knowledge of that through experience too. But science has like also backed up that truth. And then we also have high clinical trials with herbs. And we've been able to, get those people together and recognize the sometimes uptake in certain plants. So we have science to really show us again that impact of plants.
How do you balance between those two, like when you're helping somebody in terms of like, okay, this herb has been clinically shown to be helpful for this particular issue versus other approaches, like, for example, the person having a relationship with the plant that's emerging, or your own intuition, or I'm sure there's a lot of like folk traditions about herbalism that match herbs to particular challenges that are not yet scientifically proven. So how do you relate between those different sources of validation that something works?
Well, I like to know and have confidence one way or another. So I like to use clinically proven herbs and treatments and sort of. And then sometimes I'll have a herb that might pop in my mind or be like present or come up in a conversation with a client. Maybe they talk about the herbs and it might not relate, but I might put it in the formula. So I would kind of make that bonus. I would go with, personally, I would go with what I know either through what might be clinical proof or just ancient knowledge. Although I'm not attached to a study. I don't necessarily need studies to validate. Sometimes I can get silly when studies validating to a plant because I think that there's all the politics involved and the study could have been poorly done. So my confidence might come from my teacher's knowledge that I trust in very strongly, and that comes from their experiences with their patients and clients. So I consider that knowledge true. But I need to have some kind of strong evidence for the core foundation that I have. And then there might be like some more symbolic, spiritual herbs that is like up to them. That's true.
So you have some lineages, I guess, with the teachers and that knowledge that's passed down, which makes me curious about the lineage landscape, I guess, in herbalism.
Yeah.
Is it fairly unified, or are there like tons? Is it super fragmented? There's tons of different lineages that are not necessarily aligned with each other.
Yes, but I don't know if I want to use that term, fragmented and not aligned. But
Right.
there is countering beliefs. But I think herbalists are holistic people, and so we just see it as like a landscape, a symphony of many different traditions. And oftentimes herbalists will study more than one, but they need to be more steeped in one in particular. So my lineage, I studied with Paul Bergner, and he taught us vitalist herbalism. And that is like a combination of a bit of a somewhat eclectic herbalism and physiomedicalists. And those are people that are synergizing European herbal tradition and Native American herbal tradition. And this is really rich and strong medicine for a really long time as like, I want to say, common in popular culture. But it has faded out. So Henry Lenoir is one of the forefathers of this tradition, and he emphasized the connection with nature. So when I said vitalism, it's not exactly synonymous, but it's similar to nature cure, and it's working with nature to support our vital force. And that is a term used in vitalism, but it's the same thing as chi or prana used in other traditions. And that is the invisible force of our vitality. And we want to use plants to boost and build that. We want that's what we're working towards versus using plants and herbs to work to eliminate that symptom.
I see.
But once you build that vital force, you have your own power to recalibrate, and the symptom may go away, likely, if you're building up your vital force.
Is that somewhat analogous to the immune system? Like it's I know it's different because it's operating on a different plane or a different level, but
you could call it that because
sense,
the
right?
Immune system is way more than what we have like defined. It runs through every other system.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of it's definitely connected to the immune system.
Yeah. So that makes me want to go more into the beyond the addressing a particular illness or symptom, like preventative or regenerative or holistic, or there's something about that which is beyond, oh, you have an illness now, let's deal with it. There's also something about general health.
Yeah.
Or like biohacking or that kind of stuff. So I'm curious if you want to talk more about that side of herbalism as well and how you relate to that.
Yeah. Lifestyle medicine. And I think that's a wonderful way to engage with herbalism. And I think maybe people are turning towards it much more in the last 5 years even. And switching off coffee and taking adaptogens and chaga mushrooms have become really popular. So that would be a way in which, the relatively well person is turning towards plants to nourish And that's something that my teacher Paul really emphasized, like that we're undernourished, and that's where you start with nourishment. And then also you continue. So after you get through an illness, we constantly need to nourish our bodies, and that nourish that vital force in order to enjoy life. So that would be a way of what is the goal of lifestyle medicine, so that we can be in our strongest vital force and enjoy life to the fullest, and really also access our purpose. That's also very important as well, vitalism, to things like that. That's the goal, to be well and clear enough to access that and fulfill and live within that energy.
Yeah, I love the undernourished. There's one thing, we're ill or we're sick. And then the other layer is we're undernourished, which is beyond the specific moment of being sick. There's also this, it's not just about being neutral, it's about being nourished.
Mm-hmm.
And in the nourished state, illnesses are more easily worked through.
Oh, yeah.
And not completely, of course. Like you can still get viruses, and you can still have all kinds of illnesses, but a lot of them get dealt with, and I feel like a lot of chronic illnesses don't even necessarily come up as much in that, if you're nourished.
Yeah.
Feels like the big black hole in a way underlying a lot of our current healthcare system and how we view health is that a lot of those things wouldn't be there if there was like beyond just the like we're dealing with the thing right now, like a deeper like nourishment focus around the whole thing.
Yeah. And as an herbalist, maybe more of that science side, it's about nutrients. So making sure we have a strong vitamin and mineral profile status, nutrient status. That means that we are fulfilling and beyond what is necessary, not just taking us out of disease state, which what the RDA is, like percentage of vitamin C that you need to not get scurvy, but we want to take it beyond and have enough vitamin C to be extremely well thriving, optimized. And that's a word we get a lot in biohacking. So I'll bring it back to biohacking too in a second. So we're very undernourished, and our food is undernourished with the vitamins and minerals. So that's a cycle that's happening that is like a downward cycle with the soil being depleted, and then we're eating food from that soil or just from above that is depleted from nutrients, real nutrients, and so then we are. And so that's a downward cycle. And what I've been saying, regenerative herbalism, that would be having more of like a upward spiral to, as we eat and live and integrate adaptogens too, we are nourishing ourselves with vitamins and minerals, and we're also nourishing ourselves with other plant profiles and constituents that can strengthen our organs.
That makes me curious about can you optimize it in the sense, like you were saying earlier, where you extract it out of the plant and then take it as a pill, or does that, because there's something about the holistic nature. I studied complex systems, and often when you aggregate a bunch of components together, they're not just the sum of those components. They like interact in ways that create a whole new thing. And that's something I've been, curious about for a while and looked into various ways, which is how big of a difference is there between, for example, consuming a plant whole, or like with protein, for example, like consuming actual meat or actual whatever natural substance you're eating that has protein versus like a protein powder.
Yeah.
How big of a difference is that? Or is it just like optimizing the ratios of the nutrients? Yeah.
Well, I think we're all experimenting right now, especially in biohacking is a big experiment. And I think that's part of the spirit of biohacking. It is a big experiment. And then sometimes people that are pushing the edges of that, there is a cost. And I wish I can remember exactly what, I think it's just around a golden seal. A lot of people are taking for metabolic health, and they just recently identified that it has a downside by isolating that and taking higher doses. There's been a negative consequence. In addition to that positive consequence, there's a negative thing, and forgive me for not knowing that detail, but That's an example. And that is happening and probably will continue to happen as long as people are isolating things. So
is that a general rule, would you say, of isolating things, or is that just in certain circumstances?
I personally I agree with you that and that's I have a really holistic approach. And then someone else is entitled to have their point of view that isolating is a great idea. But I think, and especially since I study the plants, like they are beings that, were made and designed perfectly. And so I think that it's ideal to take it as one plant, as nature intended. Use the phrase that you might, even if you were to take high dose curcumin, I would not take it forevermore, and I would take it in addition to the whole plant turmeric. That would provide some like backup safety that there's the whole matrix, and they balance each other out.
Right.
So that would be my approach if I wanted to go high dose on something. I wouldn't do it forever, and I would also take the whole plant. Yeah, and so biohacking loves optimization, and that's a word we might not say in herbalism, but ultimately that's what we're going for too. We're looking for thriving and going above just getting out of the deep state. We want to go higher, and that's essentially optimizing. So there's a lot of parallels, and I think that maybe the metaphors are different. So I see in biohacking it's more mechanical, and the founder of biohacking is like a former software engineer. So the metaphor is computers and systems. And yeah, we're kind of a computer and a system, but it's more mechanical metaphors of like gears and optimizing, and we're just this machine. But herbalism, the metaphor is nature. So we ourselves as nature and part of nature, and we're looking more to harmonize. So that would be kind of the spirit difference, but there's a lot of overlap too.
Yeah. That brings me to a visual of two models of how to relate to optimization, which is if it's just tweaking the inputs and the inputs linearly add up to some effect. That's the more mechanical approach where you're just you're tweaking all the inputs to get to the right effect. But when you're taking a holistic approach and you're seeing us as an ecosystem, to optimize an ecosystem is different because the main shift in how the ecosystem structure is in the relationships. Mm-hmm. And that's the main, not just even one-on-one relationships, but the whole system has emergent aspects that are not present in the parts. And so it's not just about tweaking the parts, because you might tweak a part here, and that's not just going to lead to a linear effect of this. It's going to the whole system's going to rearrange to some extent. So it doesn't look as much like optimization as what we're used to with just you're shifting the inputs, and it's more like a linear mechanical approach. But it still is optimization. It's just operating on a whole different model of what we are and what it even means to be optimized. It's like ecosystemic approach, which is totally different. And I think there's often, even for myself in the past, I was not able to see how the optimization was also happening in that domain, because it just looked very different from the optimization that I was in the cultural hat. When we think of optimization, it looks a particular way. It looks very different in holistic approaches, but it's still happening there. It's just we have to take off that hat and basically shift our models of reality to be more systemically oriented and less mechanically oriented.
That's why I like this term regenerative. I kind of have only started using that for about the past year, regenerative herbalism, because I think it describes a little more clear of how we're going deep and regenerating at the core of ourselves, and not just in the term clinical herbalism, which is kind of how I also describe myself and used to. It's not very clear. It sounds kind of cold and clinical, aka cold, but it's really rich and full of potential, and also has that metaphor of regenerative farming and relating to the way there's ecosystems in the earth, and there's the four elements in the earth, and we have those too. And let's think about systems and looking for systems and cycles, and harnessing the power of those cycles to regenerate, like the cycle of day and night. Every day we have an opportunity to regenerate if we sleep well. And within women's health, the menstrual cycle is an opportunity to constantly regenerate every month. And so really first learning that to be true and then knowing how to live and support the regenerative aspect of your menstrual cycle.
Yeah, it's a great example of where the optimization looks very different from what you would think. You were just biohacking with supplements, versus like living with the cycles. It almost feels in a way like stepping back from optimization, but it's actually stepping more towards optimization when you shift the reality of what we are, the fact that we are these like beings integrated into nature and that we are cyclical in so many ways. I actually have a friend who's currently running a cycle booster business incubator, which is focused on helping women who want to thrive in business and like do it in harmony with their cycle.
Amazing.
It seems like it's doing well. So
great. That's great. Yeah. There's also ways to that's feminine leadership. It's a good way to tap into
for sure
the truth. So the different kind of energy.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that's like this is going a little bit off topic, but there's something that really blew my mind was seeing how like days are a more masculine cycle because they're tracked to the sun, and the sun has a daily cycle, and the moon has a monthly cycle, and that's the more feminine cycle. And society is more oriented towards the day cycle and less towards the month cycle. So that's a cycle, particularly for women, that is there's a lot of space there for optimizing health and well-being in so many ways to attune to the cycle and like let life be structured to the extent that it's possible around it, and then actually become more effective and like harness the strengths of each part of the cycle. But it's something that's not as embedded in society. Like we already know how to harness the day cycle. There's a lot there, and society's already structured around that. Not so much the month cycle. So, there's a lot of space there for women in particular to like really like lean into the optimization around the cycle. And luckily, it seems like there's more and more stuff happening around where people are trying to encourage that and build community processes and systems around it.
Absolutely. It's awesome. And I don't think that's off topic at all, because what that's doing is it's building your vital force. So it's just not with plants. And I mean, that's a huge part of what I studied. I at herb school, but you don't want to use the herb if to support someone's immune system, but they're not sleeping at night. Maybe you depending on the reason why, if that's changeable, we need to change that first. You can't just, it's irresponsible to just kind of give an immune herb and address the fact that there's an issue with sleep. Whether you're using plants or not, you need to educate and visit the issue of sleep, because there are certain things that are just foundational, and we don't want to use herbs as a band-aid and get the foundation and wait for such a foundation. And I think, like you said, that our culture is revolves more around the solar cycle and the lunar cycle. We're learning more about it, but actually we abuse the solar cycle. Like a lot of us stay up late.
True.
So we're not tapping into regenerative power, and I feel that's new and hot topic is working with sunlight in the morning. Like Andrew Huberman is a huge proponent of the neuroscientist, right? And so is Dave Asprey. He's a biohacker, a famous biohacker, and so that we're having to remember how to access the rhythm of our day and what the sun can do, because we're living inside way too much, and we need to be like, oh yeah, sun is really cool, and it has medicine for us, and let's remember how to connect with it and harness the energy.
Yeah, we take it for granted, but during the solar eclipse, the one that happened a year ago, I had such a profound revelation of like the sun is a thing, because it's just such a background all the time, but then just having it be going away for 3 minutes or so, and then coming back and then feeling the entire earth change, and the temperature dropped by 10 degrees. All the birds started going crazy, and the light got really weird, and even just loose of the physical effects, even like psychologically and emotionally, I was like totally thrown off, and it just gave me such an appreciation for what an incredible force the sun is. And even just if you feel, even just feeling on my skin right now, it's like that is a lot of energy just entering me, and entering me, and all the plants, like all they're doing is just absorbing this energy. It's amazing. So there's so much to really attune to that cycle, and even loose of just waking up with the sun. That's one layer, but then there's even almost a more spiritual layer of being like, wow, this huge ancient force that's just always there, and that has in many ways generated or contributed, formed the foundation of everything around us, and given all the energy that enabled life to evolve in the first place. And we're so connected to it too. You'd be nothing without the sun. And then fire, which is like our own little mini version of the sun, and the body. Yeah, anyway, just talking about the layers, like there's so many layers. Go deeper and deeper, and it just gets more and more luscious and nurturing. Yeah. And also more uncertain, and unsafe initially. Like that's why we're not all doing that all the time. It's because it is a big uncertainty and unsafety stuff at first, and then you realize you never were safe in the first place. It was an illusion, and now you're actually safer. Cool. So last question. Any book recommendations that you have? Or podcast or anything, something that recently has been really insightful, or a foundational book from the past, change spirit. So one or a few, whatever comes to mind.
Well, In Search of Medicine Buddha is a great book. And it's a book about healing, and also a reminder of how powerful plants are, and it weaves together the spiritual aspect and the more tangible science aspect. Maybe more on the spiritual side, but that's the book that pops into mind. It's written by David Crow. Yeah.
Cool, yeah, I haven't heard of that book, so I'm gonna check it out.
Great, yeah.
I love the title.
Yeah. That's an amazing one. And then, you know what? I'll just share my go-to. So on the other side of the spectrum, where you just want to know, like, what is that going to do? And yeah, you can always go deeper, but like, what are the agreed upon general benefits of this plant? Where does it grow, and what parts are used? So those are like really awesome basic pieces of information. It's called the Desktop Herbal. And so I received Mars, and she's based in Boulder, Colorado, and I worked with her and I worked there and studied there. She's a wonderful teacher, and she has many great books. But this is like a desktop reference where you want that top layer.
Like a textbook, I guess.
Textbook, yeah. And it's just like, A to Z. Most commonly used. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. This is awesome. I love how many rounds we went through.
Wow. Thank you. For having me here.